Okay, this video we are continuing on the beginner's guide to SDL2 and CPP2. So if this is the first video you're starting with, you're going to need to go to GitHub, Programming Rainbow, Beginner's Guide to SDL2 and CPP2. You're going to need to clone that repository with Git. And then after you move inside of that folder that you get, the Beginner's Guide to SDL2 and CPP, you're going to need to then clone from inside that folder. You're going to need to clone Herb Sutter's CppFront, which is Sutter CppFront, and you will need to compile that. So this is the 7th video, so if you are just starting out in this, you're going to need the source code from the 6th video, the last video, and you're going to need to move that into the source folder so you can follow along. We are continuing on with where we left off in video 6, so we are going to use that source that we're starting with. Okay? So this, so far we have a window that opens and closes. We have a background that we're displaying. We have colors that we can change randomly. We have text that we've created and it moves around the screen. We also have the icon that's loaded. We have the title that we have. So this video we're going to be making a player sprite and we're going to move that around with our actual keys. So let's change the title here. We'll call it player sprite. And the first thing we're going to need is to actually load our sprite. So we are going to do a lot of things the same way. We're going to need a smart pointer to a texture. So I'm just going to grab this bottom one right here. The last one we did for text is going to be a pointer to a texture. So we're going to grab that. And we want to call ours, we can call it sprite. Okay, so that gets our pointer to our sprite. We will also need a velocity and a rectangle. So let's just make that right away. So this will be sprite rect, an SDL rect. I need a colon here. Rect. This will be equal to just an empty rect, just like we did with the other one. And we will, for this one, we're just going to have a text velocity. We're not going to have an X and a Y velocity, or it's going to be sprite. This will be an int, 32-bit int, and it'll be equal to 5. So our player sprite's going to move faster than our text. Okay, so we have a sprite rect, we have a sprite velocity, and we have a sprite smart pointer to a texture that is cleaning up after itself. Okay, and we have our title up here. So we need to load this, and that's going to be in the load media. And we are just loading a texture like we have before with the background, so I'm just going to take this entire thing right here, because this is what we've already seen before. And we need to change the name to sprite. And the image that we're loading is going to be over here in the images folder, and it's going to be Cpp2 logo PNG, just like it's the image that we loaded previously for setting the window icon. Same image. And we could have actually loaded that image as a surface and then converted the surface to a texture, but I want to show you a different way here of getting a rectangle from a texture. So because I want to show you a different way, we are just loading it directly as a texture this time. So we're using image load texture. We have our render. Our image is capital C Cpp2 logo. That's our image. We need to check if that pointer has been populated. There. Okay, error loading, yes. And that's still from the image, yes, that's all good. So we have the image loaded now. The problem is we don't have a rect. So if we were to display this image right now, it would take up the whole screen. And we can do that. We can just grab this guy right here. And remember, the render, everything gets painted from back to front. So we have a clean render, we have a background, we have a text on top of it. Now on top of that, we can put a player, and it'll be the sprite. So if we do this sprite right here, we should see an image in the very top left-hand corner, but it won't be in the top. The origin will be in the top left-hand corner, but it'll be stretched to the width of the screen and to the height. So it might look really funny because we've used the entire source of the image that we loaded in, which is fine. The whole source is fine, but the destination is the entire screen of our game, the entire render, and we're using that entire thing. So that's what's going to stretch the image. So we're going to show that first before we fix it. Okay, I think that's all we need just to show this working. We are going to need CppFront, and we're not doing that. So we're compiling, we're using CppFront to compile our Cpp2 source into C++ standard code. And now we need to run GCC, and this needs to be, we need to use the CppFront include directory to get a helper, a utility header file, and this needs to be compiled as std C++23, and we are compiling just normal CPP file from that source folder, and demo is our name. Okay, we've done something wrong. That's fine, figure it out. Oh, I know what I've done. So when I compiled it here, I completely left off, and I don't know why, all the libraries that we need. We don't need all of these. We don't need the sound one yet, but we need those. I'm not sure why I had that. That was in my fish history. I'm using fish shell, and my autocomplete didn't add on the linkers that we needed. So now it's compiled, so let's see it run. Now, remember, this should be showing us the player sprite, which is the Cpp2 logo, but it's going to be wonky. It's going to take up the entire screen. That's the idea, what should be happening. And there it is. See that? It looks kind of wonky. It's just being stretched. So now we're going to get a rectangle from an actual texture this time. Last time we got it from a surface. So the way we do that is we have a new function, and it's SDL query texture. And this is something I'm going to check to see if it fails. I kind of check everything, anything that's major that's loading in as a resource or something I need for the game, I check to see if it fails. If it's in the game loop happening over and over again, I don't check to see if those fail. So what this does is this function, we send in the texture to this function, and then we have these, the format and the access. We're actually not going to do anything with those. So those are both going to be set to null or null pointer for this. But if we send in the address of where we want to hold the width and the height, this function will set them. We're going to send in the address of our rect width and the address of our rect height, and this function is going to populate those from the texture. This is more complicated than the surface, and this one can fail. So that's why if I do have a surface, I just grab the width and height from the surface. It's easier. But this one's a little bit more complicated and can fail. So, but if you're just loading things as textures, this is what you would do. And this is going to be 0 on success and some other code on failure. So we can just wrap this in an if statement. So we will put that in the media. Right here, yes. So I'm going to wrap this in an if, because I know if it gets anything other than 0, something has gone wrong. See both of those now. So yeah, we need to send in the texture itself, which is going to be sprite. And we need to get the pointer out of this. So that's our texture. Our next two are I believe it's our next two are both null pointers. So our format and our access. We'll do the null pointer. Okay, and this is the part where we're actually going to set it. So we need to send in the address of our sprite rect w and our sprite rect height. So it'll go like this. So that's our width. And the way we send in the address is the ampersand on the back end of it in CppF2. So that's our sprite rect width and our sprite rect height. And we need another, since we're wrapping this in an if statement, we need another one of those and our block. So if this fails, what's going to happen is what's in the block, which is going to be our throwing an exception. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to call this error querying texture. Whoops, this texture is fine. Change this word. Hopefully that's spelled right. And this is an SDL error right there, and the runtime's fine. So that will load our image, and that's going to query the image. And now we'll have a rect. So down here, we can change this to, and it's the same thing. You see the address here. Sprite rect. So now we're going to have our image being displayed nicely in the top left-hand corner. Okay, we got the linker libraries in this time. Okay. All right, so that is the nice image. That's the size it should be, not scaled up or down. So now we want to move this image around, but I want to move it with the keys, but not the way that we were checking keys before, because before we were checking if the key is down, if the key went from up to down. So you're going to get this instance, like if you watch down here on the bottom, if I press B, it goes B and then it repeats, right? It kind of hits B one time, it pauses, then repeats. That's because that's an action from going up to down, and your computer is saying, oh, I think you want this repeated after a delay. We don't want that in the game. We want just to know, is the key in the down state? Not did an action happen, an event from it to go up to down, but is it just in the down state? So that is going to be different than what we did before. So there is an internal array of the entire keyboard, and it's internal to SDL, and we just basically need a pointer to it. So this is not a resource that we are managing. We're not wrapping this in a smart pointer or anything else. This is not our resource. This is SDL's internal resource. And it's a keyboard, and it uses an enum to index into whatever key that you want to know if it's up or down. And it's 0 if it's up and 1 if it's down. So the great thing about this is it uses the scan codes. Those are already in enum, and that's how it indexes. So we already know the scan codes. We've already seen them: SDL scan escape, SDL scan code space. So now we can go left, right, up, down. We can do ASWD. We can do whatever we want. So what we need is we need to hold a pointer to this keyboard, the keyboard state. This is a function that returns a pointer to it, but we need to hold that, and then we can index into that and find out whatever key we want if it's being pressed. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, in the class, we're going to create that pointer. And again, this is not something that we are managing. So we need to go into the class up here, and just under the event, it's kind of the same thing. We're dealing with events or the key state, so I'm just going to group it up. And this one is, again, this is not a smart pointer. We just need a pointer to a thing that already exists. So, and we're not managing this. This is something SDL manages. So we're going to call it keystate. That's the name we're going to give it. And it is a pointer. And this is the way we do a const. So over here, it's a const uint8. You see the signature here. So the way the signature is in CppF2 is a little bit different. It looks like this. And now we're going to use that function that we were right here. We're going to use the function. And we don't actually want, so this is going to be a null pointer in here as well. And this is just going to give us a pointer to that internal array that we can use keystate to index into for whatever key that we want to look at. So that is that. What we're going to do is we're going to make another function like this text update, but we're going to call it sprite update. This is also an in out. This, not right. In out this equals, there we go. Okay, so for this one, we're going to be checking that array. So if, and I'll just show it real quick one and then we'll look at it. So that key state that we just created, and then we're indexing it. Oh, come on. Yes, that's what I want. So now if we want to check if we're moving left, there is one that's just called left, and that's going to be the left. Sorry, we're not checking if we're moving left. We're checking if the left arrow key is pressed down. So what it is this is an array of the entire keyboard, and the way that we index it into it is with the enum of the scan codes. These scan codes are enums. So the scan code equals whatever key that it says. So this is equivalent to whatever the number the left key is. And so if I index this, the answer from this is either going to be a 0 or a 1. If it's 0, it's not being pressed. If it's 1, it's being pressed. And it's not an event, it's just the state of it. Okay? But we can put, we could do left and A. We can go keystate. Okay, we can go scan code A, like that. So either one of those we could use as left. You don't have to put both of them, but it's just an option there. And I'm just going to say, if it's moving left, we're decrementing. So I'm going to decrement it by sprite velocity. So that's just going to get us to move left. And we're not doing bounds checking. This is just controlling the sprite. Okay. So I'm just going to copy this because I don't want to type out that long key state index every time. So we have left, and then we can do right. Right would be D, or you're using ASWD. And then right should also increment X. And then we can say up. That would be W. And this one is going to be decrementing the Y. And then we have down. And this is S. And this one is incrementing Y. Okay, now we need to call this from our run. You know, we're checking events, and then we are updating, and then we are drawing. So I already have the update for the text here. Just right after it, I'm going to put the sprite update. All right. Let's see if this compiles. Okay, I'm going to try my right, down, up, left, D, W, S, A. So they all work. So I can go diagonal, I can go that way. And you see I am moving faster than the SDL. We set the speed of the SDL to 3 and the speed of my character is at 5. If we're getting roughly 60 frames a second, roughly, that means that I'm moving about 300 pixels per second, whereas the SDL is moving not 300. It's going to be something like 2 something. I'm not quite sure. That would be 3 times 60 is 180, something like that. Yeah. So we have everything set, I think. Yeah. So that's a pretty easy one for this. Let's just go over real quick what we did. So we did add a new rect and a velocity there. We got a pointer, and this is a const, to the internal because we don't want to be messing with that. We're just reading from it. And it's just reading the internal SDL array for us. That is the keyboard. We have a new sprite texture, but we've already seen that before. We have the loading of the sprite. We've seen that before, but we have this new one where we query it by using SDL query texture. We're sending in the texture. We have 2 null pointers for those options. And then the second 2 are the addresses of the width and the height, whatever you're holding it. I'm holding it as a rect, so that works for me. And here is our update. And all we're using is that keystate pointer we created above. We're just indexing it with those scan codes. And these are the same scan codes that we used earlier to check the key event for the escape and the space. So it's the very same set. This is all the same. We are drawing the sprite here after everything else, so it's on top of everything, using its rectangle. And I think that's about it. So thanks for watching. Bye.